Thanks, Natasha. And it's good to see everyone here. I see everyone putting who they are and what they do in the chat. It's exciting to see both some people, some clients that we have, some people I noticed that I've done website reviews for recently, as well as some new faces. So thanks for being here, guys. So the first thing I want to talk about, as Roberta mentioned, is I want to talk about how to clearly communicate what your organization does in 10 seconds or less. So I know what you're probably thinking. That's totally impossible. What we do is really complicated. We work with so many different kinds of people. There's no way we can communicate what we do in 10 seconds or less, but you can, and I'm going to show you how. So the thing that I want you to get out of this part of the webinar, if you don't remember anything else, that most people come to your website to solve a problem. Most of the time, those problems fall under one of three categories. They want to get help, they want to participate in their community, or they want to support a cause that they care about, or some combination of those things. People are coming to your website because they want to solve these problems or overcome these challenges. So remember that. So the first tool that you can use to clearly communicate what you do in 10 seconds or less on your website is what we call the 10-second test, which is exactly what it sounds like. So think about it this way. If someone were to come to your website for the first time without knowing anything about your organization, would they be able to answer these three questions within the first 10 seconds of being on your website? What do you do? How will it make my life better? Or why should I care about what you do? And what action do I need to take, or what do I need to do next to get to engage with you? You need to answer these three questions. So I would encourage you to actually practice writing out exactly what your organization does in one line or in a couple sentences. Think about how you make people's lives better, and think about why people should care about what you do, which, by the way, is something that a lot of nonprofits actually take for granted. You're in your work so much, you forget like why it actually matters, and you don't think to communicate that to people. And then think about what action you want people to take. Now, this action is most likely not going to be something broad like learn more, even though we like to use that on our buttons on our websites. It's probably going to be something more like explore our programs, get started, apply now, donate, volunteer, something very specific that they can say yes or no to. So calling someone to action is not the time to be vague. So let's talk about how we can actually structure the first section of your website to answer these three questions so you can pass the 10-second test. So this is what the very top section of your website should have so that you can pass this test. So you should start with a logo in the top left, and then a clear menu across the top with a clear call to action button in the top right-hand corner. So you'll notice from this image, this is what this little Z that you see here, this is what people's eyes do whenever they look at your website naturally. This is, science has shown that this is how people read information. So they start in the top left, they read across, and they go down and they go across. And so you're strategically placing information at each point that people's eyes are following. So you have your logo, a clear menu with just a few necessary items, and then a button. And you follow that down, and then you have a big hero image with helpful text on the front of it. And that text should have an aspirational headline that talks about what you do and why people should care, how it makes their lives better, something sort of aspirational. And then you should have a sub-headline beneath that in smaller text that communicates exactly what you do to help them achieve that thing. And then beneath that, you can have your clear call to action button that shows people either A, how to achieve that success for themselves, or B, how to get involved with your organization to help you help other people achieve that success. So let's take a look at a couple examples here so you can see what this looks like in real life. So this one is from a client called The Leader's Journey. So this isn't a final website design. This is just a wireframe to show you this outline. So we do put photos on our websites here at Solix, believe it or not. So you see their logo or logo placeholder would be here in the top left, a short menu with only 4 sections across the top, and then this Get a Leadership Coach button here. And you'll notice your eye naturally is drawn down to the button that matches that, another Get a Leadership Coach button right here. And then between those, you would have an image here on the background with an aspirational headline, lead your organization with confidence and clarity, followed by a subheadline that says exactly what they do to help people achieve that: coaching, team leadership development, and consulting for wholehearted leadership. So this is a website that passes the 10-second test. You know, what do they do? Coaching, team leadership development, and consulting. Why should I care? Because it's going to help me lead with confidence and clarity. What do I need to do? I need to click Get a Leadership Coach. So this is a website that passes the 10-second test. Here's another example from a client of ours. Again, logo in the top left, Casa de Esperanza. Short menu across the top that you'll notice it has a little arrow, so it does have drop downs. You can have more pages. You're just not listing every single item up here, and I'll show you how to structure that here in a few minutes. And then they have 2 buttons, donate and get help. And again, the eye is drawn down to those same 2 buttons right here, donate and get help. A philosophical statement: every child deserves a home that gives them hope. That answers the why should I care question right away. And then beneath that, what do they do? Voluntary foster care and family support services for parents in the greater Houston, Texas area. This is a level of clarity that's really tough to achieve. It's harder than it looks, but it's so important if you can find this level of clarity on the top section of your website, so that when people come to these clients' websites, they can answer who they are, what they do, why it matters, and what action they need to take in 10 seconds. So I know that it's easier said than done, but answering these few questions is a non-negotiable for your website. And sticking to this format is going to be really helpful in doing that. So something else that I want to mention is the importance of using clear and concise language throughout your website, not just in this section, but from top to bottom. So most nonprofits are either too vague or they're too wordy. They either assume they're talking to someone who's already familiar with them and their organization, and they don't say much, or they assume they need to explain all the details of their organization all at once. So, I see stuff often like, this program was created in 2003 from a grant from so-and-so and a partnership with such and such organization. And then, hey, we actually hired a new executive director and we have some great board members. And it goes on and on without getting to the heart of this level of clarity. Voluntary foster care, family support services. We need to find that clarity. Now, I know that nonprofit websites are big and informative a lot of the time. You have a ton of programs, you have a ton of information you need to communicate. So hear me saying this, the problem isn't too much information. You can have your information, it's important. The problem is trying to communicate all of it at once. So often nonprofit websites are big and disorganized, and they don't have an intuitive flow. They're not leading people through, a big story from top to bottom. So we need to be concise. We also don't want to be vague. So a lot of nonprofits will say things like, we help people blink. They don't actually say how they do it or what their programs are. So we want to be clear in what we do, and we want to be specific. We also want to be concise. It's a tough balance to find, but it's important. We want to do this because, remember this, people don't read websites, they scan them. And so that's why another tool that you can use to help communicate on your website is to actually write your website at a 7th to 9th grade reading level. So your audience may not be 7th graders, it may not even be 9th graders, more than likely. But writing at a lower reading level is the best way to help people scan your website quickly. And what we say, burn fewer mental calories to understand what you do. So really quick here, you can actually use a tool called Hemingway. I use it in all my website reviews, and we'll send you a link after the webinar. It's free. It lets you paste the copy in from your website, so you can actually look at what reading level your website is written at. So you can see here on the left and right, the first is a client website review that I did. I don't think it's anyone who's here in this room. I'm not going to say who it is, but it says that it's written at a grade 16 reading level, and 4 out of 5 sentences that I took from their website are very hard to read. And the other one, not to brag, is from the Solace website, which is written at, it says, a grade 9, with 1 out of 10 sentences being very hard to read. So you might be surprised. Again, you might be too vague, and that might come across as a 7th grade reading level. That's not the end all be all, but it's still a good tool to make sure that you're not saying too much, or you're not going over people's heads. So something you can do is you can paste your copy in here, look at the readability score, and then actually paste it in a tool like ChatGPT and ask it to rewrite it at a 7th to 9th grade reading level. Don't just paste that into your website and use that, but look at how it changes and read it out loud, and it can kind of give you a sense of, oh, this is what it should sound like when we talk about our organization. It can be a really, really eye-opening experience. So this is what we need to do if we're going to communicate in 10 seconds or less. So another tool that you can use to pass the 10-second test is unique and high-quality images that communicate your mission. Because the visual on your website, as Alex talked about in our last webinar, should not be neglected. Your words are the most important. I might be a little bit biased because I'm a copywriter, but it's true. Your visuals are the second most important. So there's a few types of photos that we want to avoid. The first is stock photos of people smiling into the camera. We want to avoid things that are obviously posed. So a few things, a hit list of photos to avoid. People holding hands, hands making hearts, plants growing out of jars of money, pathways in the woods, raised hands on a hilltop. I'm sure you've seen these photos. Some of you might even have them. Now, I want to point out here, these aren't, even though I'm dogging on these photos, they did used to be a legitimate style choice. The problem isn't that they're horrible photos. The problem is that now we're in 2024, and so many organizations have used them that they become cliche, and they don't actually communicate anything new. So it's not so much that it's bad or it's communicating something bad, but it's a wasted opportunity to communicate more and something unique about your organization. So something else to keep in mind about stock photos, that people don't talk about enough, is that most stock photos, and you might notice that even here in this set, most stock photos are actually of white people, almost exclusively. And this isn't your fault. This is something with the broader stock photo industry, which is a rabbit trail I'm not going to go down now. But what it means is that it's not your fault but you might actually, if you look at your website, a lot of organizations and businesses end up with photos only of white people or, certain types of people on their website. So what that means is that we have to actually be proactive about finding or creating photos that represent our audience. So we want to look for a diverse set of races, ethnicities, sexualities, genders, ability levels, whatever types of people and experiences are represented in your audience. We want to make sure that these are represented in the photos on your website. So we want to look for, something that you can actually do is actually have a professional photographer come out to your organization to take photos. So we want to look for photos that are custom that no one else is going to use except for you. Now, I understand that photos and videos of real people can be touchy for a lot of nonprofits, and rightfully so, especially if you're working with vulnerable people. So a lot of nonprofits just don't mess with it because it's too legally and ethically complicated. And I totally get that. But it actually doesn't have to be complicated. So at Solace Media, we actually help our clients through this process. It's something Natasha, the co-founder here, has actually done for a lot of organizations and has helped guide people through. So we have media release forms that we share with our clients and ethical storytelling principles that we use to help them capture photos and videos of their clients. So let us know, first of all, if that would be a helpful webinar topic for you. It's something that I know we can talk about a lot that's helpful for a lot of folks. But also let us know if it would be helpful to share some of those templates and the resources after that. Let us know in chat and we can share those media release forms and our ethical storytelling principles with you guys after the webinar. So now let's talk about the formula that you can use to organize your website pages. We're going to zoom out a little bit from the specifics of like your homepage and the copy that you're using to how you organize the pages and information on your website. So the first thing the first part of this formula, there's two elements. The first one is what we call audience personas. So this is all the different types of people that engage with your organization. These are typically donors, clients, volunteers, or church partners are the most common ones, but some organizations have a lot more than that. Like there's one organization we're working with right now that probably has 25. But we're just going to use donors, volunteers, and clients for the purposes of this illustration, because almost every organization has those at least. So map out all of those different kinds of people you work with. You can think about people who are already engaging with your organization. Most have 3 or 4, some might have as many as 10 or 12. So map these out. And then next, once you map out your different personas and the types of people that work with you, you want to map out the different programs you have, where you can also think of this as actions that people can take to engage with your organization. There's a lot, most likely, right? That might be donate, volunteer, rent a venue, host a donation drive, join program A, join program B. There's a lot. So map out all of these actions that people can take to get involved with your organization. Now, as most nonprofits grow, they add programs, right? That's part of growing as an organization. But as programs get added, they don't always get added to the website in a way that makes a lot of sense. It's easier, right, to just make a new page for each program, or even just to put it up at the top of the homepage, and the homepage just keeps getting longer as new programs get added. And so then you end up with this big messy website with a bunch of pages, but it doesn't all actually fit together. But think about it this way: when you create programs internally, you create them to solve problems for a particular audience, right? You have strategic goals tied to the programs that you have. So your website should reflect that. It's the same thing as your internal process. So what you want to do is you want to take these audience personas and you want to list under each persona the programs that they would be interested in or the actions that you might want them to take. So for example, you might have a donor persona. The actions that they might take might be host a donation drive, give stock, give a one-time donation, and maybe give a recurring donation. There's a bunch of actions that a donor can take versus just donate. So you would list all of those actions under your donor persona. And then what you want to do is you want to actually create a page for that persona. So notice here, we have a persona, and then we just turn those into pages. So we have a donate page, a volunteer page, and a programs page. And on each one of those pages, we give people an opportunity to take the actions that we want them to take. Because remember, people are coming to your website to solve a problem. So if someone is coming to your website to donate, we want to make it as easy as possible for them to donate. If they're coming to your website to find out about your programs, you don't want them to have to click around to find your different programs. Don't make them go up to their menu, to your menu, and click on every one of your programs and read through a whole page to find out what your programs are. So what you want to do is you want to actually organize your site by your different types of audience members. So you want to have a page for donors, the donate page for volunteers, the volunteer page, a page for people you serve, the programs page. And then of course you can still have subpages under each one for each program. And when you do this, it's actually a form of empathizing with your audience without saying anything. When you structure your website in this intuitive way that acknowledges the things that they're trying to accomplish on your site, you're actually saying, hey, I understand what you came to this website for. You know what? We're going to make it as easy as possible for you to do that. So structure your pages around this format, structure your navigation menu around this format, and structure your homepage around this format. So to recap, you have your personas, and you have your programs to engage in or actions to take. You list your programs or your actions under each of those personas, and then you create a page for each persona with easy links to or information on every one of those actions on that page. And remember, when it comes to those actions, you can still have subpages. So you can have a donation drive page. You can have a give stock page. You can have a one-time donation page. You can still have these specific pages. So let's say, for example, you're a performing arts center and you have event venues you can rent out. You might have a page for people to rent venues because that might be a persona is, venue renter. So you would also have pages for each venue. So you might have, 30 pages on your website, but you want to have a natural flow from page to page versus having all 30 pages listed in your navigation and letting people kind of click around like a big bulletin board, because then people don't know where to go and they get lost. So you want your pages to be filed in a logical manner that maps onto your audience personas. So that's the formula to organize your website pages. So now let's talk about the 9 sections every nonprofit homepage needs, or for-profit homepage for that matter. So you'll find these sections on almost every website we create here at Solace. So this is kind of like me giving you the secret sauce or the keys to the kingdom or whatever metaphor you want to use. This, if you're not already doing this, this is going to absolutely transform your website. So the first section that you want to have is what we call the hero section. This is what we talked about at the beginning where you need to pass the 10-second test. It's the first section of your website. It should answer who you are, what you do, why I should care, and what action I need to take to get it. You want to have a headline, a subheadline, and calls to action. So you remember that Z pattern that I showed you earlier? That's your hero section. So what you want to have after that is what you can call the stake section, or I like to call it the challenge section. This talks about the challenge that your organization addresses, or you can also think of it in terms of what's at stake if your mission is successful or not. This could be relevant statistics or numbers like, X% of people in our city face this or something like that. But it could also be a few lines of text that communicates, hey, this problem exists and we're trying to solve it. What this section should make people feel is it should get them to nod their head and go, wow, yeah, I care about that too, if they're a partner. Or it should make them say, hey, this organization gets me. They get the problems that I'm experiencing. So your next section, logically, should be the solution that you offer to the challenge we talk about in the previous section. So this is a section that a lot of nonprofits, again, get wrong because as your organization grows, you have more and more programs and it all gets messy. So this section, the solution section, is your chance to give people a clear and concise way of learning what programs you have. You might have program categories in this section versus listing out every single program you have, but you do want to list specific solutions to the challenge that you mentioned above. So you have your hero section, you have the challenge that your organization helps solve, and then you have a solution section that outlines the programs you have that help solve that challenge. So these 3 sections should always go in this order. Everything after this, you can mix and match a little bit if you want to. So the next section is what we call the impact section. This is your place to show statistics, testimonials, quotes, photos, stories, all the things that demonstrate the success that you've helped create and make people feel good about what your organization does. And along with that goes what we call the guide section, which you can also call the About Us section. This is where you present your organization as the supportive guide that's here to guide people on your website to what they're looking for. Because remember, again, people come to your website to solve problems, to solve challenges. Your organization is not the hero of the story. Your organization is the guide that's helping people who come to your website. You're guiding them to solutions. You're guiding them to what they want. So this section, not the hero section, is your chance to talk about yourself as an organization. Some organizations will put this in the very top section of their website, celebrating 20 years or something like that. But the first section of your website actually is not the place for that. Guide section is the place to talk about that if and only if it's actually relevant to your audience. So this section has 2 elements, the guide section. First, you establish empathy and say, hey, we get it. We understand. We care about this problem. And then you establish authority and you demonstrate, hey, this is why we're equipped to solve this problem and why you should trust us with your dollars. Trust us with your volunteer time. Trust us to serve you with our programs. And so part of that, you notice these 3 sections go together. The impact section is sort of proving that you know what you're doing. The guide section talks about you. And then you can have a stories section or a social proof section that has quotes or stories where you can have testimonials from supporters, from clients that you serve, actual words from actual people, photos of real people. So people want to see that other people are involved in this. They don't want to feel like they're alone. So the section after that is what we call the plan section. So you're taking people from one side of a river to another side, and you're taking them from, point A to point B. And so what you're doing here is you're saying, you're giving them step 1, step 2, step 3 to say, hey, you know what, crossing this river and taking action to engage with our organization sounds like it could be a lot, There might be 50 steps, but you know what? Just step on this stone and then on this one and on this one. It's actually really simple. And science shows that when you give people a simple 3-step plan, even if you're breaking a big plan down into a few, people are more likely to take action. So this can be something really simple, like step 1, schedule a consultation, step 2, enroll in a program, and step 3, experience some sort of success, something like that. So the last section that you want to have is a ways to support section or a ways to get involved section. So most organizations have a part of their organization that's serving, that's helping people who are coming to your website to get help from your organization to receive services. But there's another part of your organization that's taking in donors and volunteers and partners. So we want all of these things to be on the homepage, but to be very clearly separated. So this section is your chance to speak clearly to people who want to support your mission. This might be 3 sections with, volunteer, donate, become a partner. And each one of those then goes to a landing page, like we talked about before, that talks to that specific audience, a volunteer page, a donate page, a partner page, something like that. So think of your homepage as a sort of jumping off point for all the different ways people can get involved with your organization. Whatever the first step people need to take to engage with you, that first step for every audience should be available on your homepage. You don't have to have every step. So for example, if we're talking about that example of renting a venue or something like that, you could have a rent a venue button. You don't necessarily have to have a rent this venue, rent that venue, rent the other venue. You can have a explore our programs button. You don't have to have every program. So ways to support, you can have a big picture section of the big picture ways that people can support your organization. The last section that you want to have is the newsletter section. This is where people can give you their email address and say, hey, I'm interested. I'm not ready to take action yet, but hey, you know what? Let's keep in touch. I want to see what you're up to, and I want to keep your organization top of mind for when I'm ready to get involved. And I personally actually do this all the time with organizations where I'm interested in the work they're doing, but I'm not ready to donate yet, but I might be at some point. So you should have a section for people to sign up to your newsletter and get updates from you. So these are the 9 sections that your homepage needs. You can have more. You probably shouldn't have less. So if you don't remember anything else from the last few minutes, remember this. Your website has to communicate clearly with language that isn't too wordy or vague. You want to use high quality visuals and specifically custom photos if you can. You want to tailor your site to your audience needs, challenges, and desires by following the framework of audience personas and programs and actions that we talked about before. And you want to structure your homepage for action by using these 9 sections. That's all I've got for you guys. I'd love to hear some of your questions now. So Natasha, do you have any questions for me?
And I know we only have a few minutes left, so we'll try to get these 4 questions in really fast. And we need to do the giveaways. So the first question is, Christian, can you please give some tips on how to message a project with a different name and brand on the same site as the primary brand?
That is a great question. And it's really, really, really tough to do. So this was a question that was submitted before the webinar, so I had a little bit of chance to pull together something to show you. So if I can share my screen now here and take a turn. So this is a great example of an organization that does this. So I think you mentioned that there's 2 different brands, not just different programs. So this is an organization that does just that, where their founder has books, and each book has sort of a sub brand. So their main website, they're called Strong Towns. They're an urban development organization. They follow parts of the pattern that we just talked about. They have a problem that they solve as an organization. They have a solution to that problem. They have a call to action. They have all of these things in orientation to who they are. But if you go in and you look at their books, they have different brands for each one of their books. So their newest one is called Escape the Housing Trap, which focuses on a specific part of what they do. Housing is one of the 5 pillars of their organization. So on their website, you can click, and it does actually take you to a different website. So you go from strongtowns.org to housingtrap.org. And you'll see that it has its own branding, and but it follows the same framework that we just talked about. It has a philosophical element. It has clear calls to action. It talks about the challenge that it solves. But what you'll notice is that as you scroll a little bit more, you notice that the video is from the main organization, Strong Towns. You'll notice that if you actually go down here, you can actually see that it links back to the main site, strongtowns.org. So it has also similar language, similar philosophical things that it's talking about, some similar imagery, but it doesn't try to be the exact same thing, but it gives you a way to go back to the original one. So what most organizations do when they're facing this problem is there's 2 ways you could do this. You can fully separate it like this and then just link back to the original organization and let this one live on its own, and be okay with the fact that some people might know that it's a sub brand of your main, or a sub project of your main organization. Or you can actually have 2 menus and I don't recommend this for everyone, where one menu is your three, however many different projects you have or different sort of sub brands. And the menu below that is the navigation menu for the brand that you're on. So you can still navigate between the different ones, but still have an orientation to where you actually are. So I would make a decision between those two. Do we want it to feel like a family of brands and we need people to understand the relationship between these different projects? Or can this project be something that stands on its own that people can find, but don't necessarily have to know about the primary organization behind it? So I encourage you also, for any nonprofit that has a lot of content, a lot of programs, this is in general just a great example of a best practice nonprofit site. Feel free to look at this and maybe we can send it in the emails afterwards. Hopefully this is a helpful example. Feel free to send us an email too if you have some more in-depth questions about that. But hopefully that's helpful.
So Christian, another question that was asked, that was submitted ahead of time, was how to create impactful landing page copy that connects with grant makers and families and emphasizes the school's values and needs.
Okay, so I'm guessing from the question that this is from a school, I would imagine, which is an organization with a bunch of different stakeholders or audience personas. So it's a good question because I know when you have one homepage, you have to talk to a bunch of different people. It can be really tough. So this might feel like cheating, but I would say if you follow the framework that we talked about today, that kind of like I talked about, empathy is baked into that framework. And so if you think about your different types of personas, so for a school, which, we just work with one that might be donors, parents, educators, something like that. Instead of trying to cram one message in for everyone, create a section on each part of your homepage to talk specifically to each audience and give them a chance to jump off to a page that's just for them about as soon as you can. So you might have, a top level section, say we're a school that does, such and such, and then say, go to this page if you're an educator, this page if you're a parent, and then use that page as a place to speak directly to them. And that's your chance to be empathetic and speak specifically to the challenges they're facing and how you can help them. So you don't have to try to be everything to everyone. It's okay to direct people over to the sections or pages that are built specifically for them. Hopefully that helps.
And I would also, actually, I'm gonna go ahead and answer this next question. Can you tell us reasons to use specific development sites over others?
Oh, sure. That's a big question. There's a lot of opinions on that. I will say we use WordPress here at Solace. It's a good platform. A lot of organizations are going to use it. The most common that I would say I can recommend in good faith would be WordPress, Webflow, Squarespace, and maybe Wix. Some organizations will find something, I don't want to say random. There's a lot of different builders out there. I would say if you can stick with those main 3 or 4, you're going to have something that's going to last a long time, that if you end up working with an agency like Solace or someone else, or if you hire someone to manage your website, you're going to have someone who can actually work in it. It's going to be updated for a long time. I don't recommend going with cheaper one-off platforms. Anything you can buy a lifetime subscription to, probably don't do it. In general, try to stay with the more popular platforms because you know that they're going to be flexible, they're going to stick with you for a long time, and they're going to be reliable. So even if you find stuff that's cheaper, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. If you're looking for a really customizable platform, go with WordPress or Webflow. If you're looking for something that you can build internally that's really, really simple and easy and you can use easy templates, go with WordPress or maybe Squarespace is what I would recommend.
Thanks, Christian. And then we have a couple more questions that were just asked. So Kathy asks, I think this is your question, Kathy, about are we recommending not to list staff or board members? And I would just say that we actually do, because that's one of the, if you don't mind, Christian, one of the most visited pages from a lot of nonprofit websites is actually your About Us page. So we would just say, don't put it on your homepage, but you do want to have a page that lists and shares who your team members are and brings credibility to your organization. How much should an organization budget to redo their website? We actually have a really good blog topic on this. So Kathy, we will send this out later and we can send this out to everyone so you can kind of get a little bit better feel of what we would recommend. And it really depends on your goals for what you want your website to do. Christian, do you want to add anything to that of how much an organization should budget?
Sure. I would say, and I guess I'm probably a little bit biased because I work with an agency who does this, but I really, really mean this. budget more than maybe you think that you should, and think of it as an investment. Don't try to go with the cheapest option. I've seen in the years I've been doing this, lots of organizations go with the cheaper option or they do it in-house or something like that. And then they come to us and have to do it all over again because it doesn't last. It's not sustainable. The agency that built it no longer exists, or the intern who built it won't hand over the keys to it. It's very well worth investing in your website if you have plenty of traffic coming to it, or you want to drive traffic to your website. So in general, I would say a good range for around a 10-page website would be anywhere from 7,500 to 20,000. And I know that's a big range. It depends on the amount of functionality that you need, but I would say anything below 5,000 to 7,500, you should probably save it up and do it the right way the first time. It'll be well worth it.
Thanks, Christian. We have one last question. How long should I wait to know that my website has improved after making changes?
Oh, that is a good question. Well, there's a few ways to think about that. I would think of it not so much in terms of time, and more in terms of visitors. So for example, if you have one visitor coming to your website a day and no one knows, you're a new organization, you're going to need a longer time. So I would maybe map on roughly what you would estimate the size of your audience to be. Sometimes, your amount of donors might be a good measure for that, or people that you serve volunteers. Kind of put some of those numbers together, the people in your audience or maybe on your email list, and wait until you have, I would say maybe 20 to 25% of that number of individual unique visitors that have visited your website since you launch, and then look at numbers. Something else too is make sure that before you do work on your website, you hire someone to do work on your website, that you actually have Google Analytics set up and you're tracking numbers. You can even install heat maps and things like that to look at specifically how people are engaging so that you have an accurate before and after. So I would say roughly just maybe 6 months to a year before, 6 months to a year after, and then about 25% of your audience representing the amount of people that have visited your website.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Christian, for your time and sharing your expertise. There were a few more questions that I got coming in, but we're going to go ahead and close the webinar right now, and we'll send out answers to those questions in a follow-up. Thank you, everyone, again for joining us, and we hope that you have a wonderful day.
Hey there, it's Christian again with a short follow-up video. I know we didn't get a chance to answer all of the questions at the end of the webinar, so I just want to take a couple minutes here to answer a few of the ones that didn't get a chance to be answered live in the recording. So the first question that we didn't get to is, do you recommend having a video on the landing page of the website? And I believe that was asked by, if I remember right, by someone from the Prestige Learning Institute who does have a video background. And to that I would say yes, video backgrounds are really, really great. Honestly, the reason that I didn't talk about it is because for a lot of organizations it's out of reach. For the same reason I talked about custom photography being difficult, getting a video is also somewhat difficult. But when you can do it, I totally recommend it if you can make it work design-wise with the background and make sure there's enough contrast you can still read the text. I would definitely do that. And it is something we do here at Solace. We don't talk about it a lot, but we do video marketing here at Solace. So yeah, a video would be a great option for a lot of organizations. Another question is, should all the 9 essential homepage sections show up on your homepage as you scroll through, or can or should some of them be links to a separate page? So that's a great question, actually. So the answer is yes and yes. So I want to show you an example of another client site here that hopefully will answer that question. So you see the hero section we talked about, the challenge section, the solution section. So all of those sections there as is, but then we have the impact section. On the impact section, so you asked, should it show up on your homepage or should it be links to a separate page? So it shows up on the homepage here, but it also links to the relevant page that goes with that. So we have an impact section that links to an impact page with an impact report. Similarly, we have a program section that outlines the programs, links out to each category of program. The how to get involved section links out to each of those pages. And also on the About Us page, or About Us section, or the guide section as I called it in the webinar, it links out to a page called Our Mission and Story, where people can go then to learn more about their mission and their story. And another question was, why didn't we talk about listing staff or board members? I know we talked about this in a little bit, but I just want to point out that this page does, oh, is it on this page? Might not be on this page, but we do have if you hover over About, there is a team page, so it should be there. It doesn't necessarily have to be on the homepage. In fact, most of the time we would advise against it. So this could be a good example. What we talk about here is the brief story summary of how they were founded, a sort of recap of how they've grown, who they are and what they do, and then sort of a philosophical statement about why it matters. You could almost call it like an elevator pitch, essentially, is what we do in that guide section. But then whenever you come here, you have a chance to jump off to learn about the team. Another question was, I would love to learn more about your ethical storytelling principles. So this is important. You will be getting, along with this email, probably where you're seeing this video, a link to these ethical storytelling principles. So this is a document that I created that's taken from a presentation that Natasha did at a nonprofit conference, I think it was. So basically it goes over general considerations and questions to ask yourself whenever you're telling a story. And when we say storytelling, what we mean is actually taking a story from a client, someone that your organization serves, and sharing their story for generally marketing purposes. So these are just questions to ask yourself and principles to keep in mind. In orientation to the different types of nonprofits, which is important to understand when you're telling stories, because your story should align with the responsibilities and considerations that come with the type of organization that you are. And then we have some practical ethical steps that you can take whenever you're telling stories. So think of this as like a sort of checklist of make sure to train recipients to share their own stories versus you sort of scripting and telling them what to do. Have open conversations about if they're getting compensated or not, how much they're getting compensated, if they want to be compensated. This is an orientation to, again, just some of the things to consider. It's not necessarily comprehensive, but it's meant to sort of point you in the right direction as far as how to think about these things. And some examples of empowering story language of what to say and not to say. Does it just consider the terms that you're using? And then this might not be clear from the doc, so I can talk about this really quickly, is true stories versus composite stories. So a true story is taking an individual person and sharing their actual story. It's a true story. Whereas a composite story is not necessarily a composite story made up of a bunch of different people that presents each story, but it's a composite story that's a bunch of different people's story presented as one in order to anonymize the people who are making up the story. There's two different types of storytelling that's very common, and there's pros and cons to each. So this talks a little bit about those whenever you're considering which type of story you want to tell. And then I also have some examples here of organizations that do ethical storytelling really well. You can go to their page, you can look at their social media, look at their blogs, things like that. Look at their videos and the way that they do storytelling, and you can kind of pattern the content that you're creating around some of that. So as always, of course, let us know if you have questions on ethical storytelling. I'm going to try to bully Natasha into doing a webinar topic on that at some point, because I think it would be really helpful to talk about this stuff and how to actually capture videos, because I know it stands between a lot of organizations. They want to do it, but it's just, there are a lot of ethical considerations for this. So hopefully this document is helpful. That was all the questions that we got, but feel free to respond to this email and let us know if you have any other questions around this webinar topic. Thanks, guys.